The word hallucination comes from the Latin term hallucinare or hallucinary. The first denoted experience of a hallucination came from the Greek philosopher Socrates, in a situation where Socrates heard a voice which he understood to be divine. Now, similar to Socrates, back then, in the Greek civilizations, they seemed to believe that the voice some were hearing might actually be the voice of God, or at least of an angelic or spiritual being. But when was it that we started to fear the unknown? I'm assuming Socrates didn't have any modern technology to help him understand what he was experiencing, but instead of ignoring it or degrading it, he and the others chose to embrace it. They gave it a name. They gave it an identity. When we give something a name is when we feel more comfortable with it, because it is no longer something unknown. My name is Aishwarya Seshadri, and my work explores the evolution of definitions for hallucinations from the ancient times to our modern era. Now, unlike the Greek civilization, the Indian civilizations didn't think this was a voice of God. Instead, they concluded that the mind, manas, is responsible for sensory perception, and that has specific functions of its own. And although the Hindu civilizations may have feared hallucinations, these sensory perceptions were still noted and studied and were given great importance as an indicator of prognosis of deceased conditions in Ayurveda. It is because of these ancient civilizations that today in our modern world we can at least start to understand how hallucinations came to be and how much they've changed since the 19th century. In our present day, hallucinations are a highly researched topic, in which there's a somewhat good understanding about some of the causes and treatments for hallucinations. There's a common understanding of what a hallucination is. Through various neurologists, neuropsychologists, and neuroscientists, the world has been given many definitions of what a hallucination is and how they affect a patient. This change has been seen over time. In the 1800s, John Esquirrel first denoted and discovered the word hallucination as a wandering mind, after he went through the symptoms himself, similar to Socrates. And by the 17th and 18th centuries, scientists denoted hallucinatory experiences as a spiritually meaningful and enlightening insight, very similar to the Greek civilizations. Later, in 2012, late neurologist Oliver Wolf-Sachs described a hallucination as percepts arising in the absence of any external reality, and described the involvement of the brain's fusiform gyrus, and in the most recently published research papers, scientists including Laura Dorwart referred to a hallucination as the experience of sensing things that only exist in your mind. Clearly, there have been a lot of shifts in the common understanding of what a hallucination is. Now, my research explores and examines both the philosophical and scientific perspectives on hallucinations across time, focusing on how definitions have changed from the 1600s to our present day. Recognizing the shifts in understanding hallucinations is important, as it influences how scientists diagnose and treat patients now. It also may give us an understanding of how scientists will consider hallucinations 100 years from now, just like how we consider the definition of hallucinations from more than 100 years ago. Hallucinations come with many negative connotations, much like all mental illnesses, and understanding the history of this hallucination can help us improve treatment and reduce stigma associated with them in the future. Hallucinations are a concept most people have heard of, but like many other mental illnesses, people lack a complete understanding of what they actually are. The objective definition for a hallucination seems to be the experience of, most commonly, seeing or hearing something that isn't actually there. There are various causes for hallucinations, and the most common cause of hallucinations is schizophrenia. However, despite how often they are portrayed, one does not necessarily have to have a psychotic disorder to experience hallucinations. Hallucinations can be caused by numerous disorders, and different disorders may cause different types of hallucinations. For example, auditory hallucinations are when patients hear voices or sounds in the absence of any stimulus or speaker. And this can be caused by PTSD, DID, dissociative identity disorder, the use of hallucinogenic drugs, and more. And on the other hand, there are visual hallucinations. Similar to auditory hallucinations, these are when patients see objects, patterns, animals, and people that are not actually there. Visual hallucinations are more commonly caused by narcolepsy, hypnosis, sleep deprivation, migraines, hallucinogenic drugs, and intense emotional experiences. Now, imagine you're sleep deprived. Maybe you've only had an hour of sleep. You're focusing on studying for your final, and suddenly in the corner of your eye you see something move. You could have sworn you just saw someone walk by, but there's no one there. Now imagine that you don't know what just happened to you. You have no idea what this name for what you just saw is. And you don't want to tell anyone because you don't want anyone to think you're crazy. This is what happens when we don't discover or when we don't choose to educate ourselves on what our brains experience. Now, we at least have some sort of definition saying that, oh, that was a hallucination. You're sleep deprived, you're probably experiencing a hallucination. But imagine we didn't have that. Understanding how hallucinations affect people in our society is important for the overall safety, neurological health, and impact on the daily life for our patients. It is important to know the underlying factors of how a hallucination influences a patient, not only for the psychologist, but for people related to the patient as well, since hallucinations can be detectors of past traumatic experiences, such as domestic abuse, violence, and more. In a few years, the definitions that stand today will become outdated, but the new definitions will be built off of these old ones. For the future, a new concept of seeing patients' hallucinations and experiencing them with the patient has come to light with the help of technology like AI. Future research will have the upper hand with technology like AI, allowing them to see and discover the before unattainable. Thank you so much.